Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're checking in from. Welcome again to the Steve and Dan Show, episode 5, I believe, I think. So I'm Dan Holloway. I'm joined with my, yes, I'm joined by my co-host, Steve Herbert. I think is that side on the screen, fingers crossed. And we are here today as well with special guest, George, who is just below us on the screen. So everybody, I'm checking in from a different place today because I'm in Toronto for the SFM Momentum Day event. I'm a little bit hungover. You can probably hear it in my voice. Met up with a bunch of SFM members last night who flew in, currently staying in an Airbnb with a few other people. We've got another SFM member, John, who is lying on a sofa working very hard at the moment. But we're about 18 floors up in this cool tower, so we've got this awesome view of Toronto in the background. I don't know if you can see that there. So yeah, it's going to be, I think, quite an exciting event. And for anybody who's watching this for the first time, if you don't know who I am, my background is in corporate software sales. I was basically earning good money, working my way up the corporate ladder, but got to a point where I wasn't really feeling fulfilled. Right? I was, earning the money, but I wasn't feeling sort of happiness as a result of it. And essentially realized that any income goal that I'd had in the past, whatever that was, had never brought me fulfillment. So when I was telling myself that in the future, more money and more income was going to, bring me fulfillment, I suddenly realized I was kidding myself. So that was when I changed directions, found SFM, started online business, met these guys and a bunch of other people, and the rest is really history. So, Steve, if you'd like to give a little bit of an overview of yourself for anyone watching, that would be awesome.
Sure, happy to. Looking forward to seeing you in a couple of days in Toronto. I'm both jealous and glad that I'm not there right now.
Well, Steve, that's what you get for slacking,
Yeah, but I don't know if I can take it. Husband, father, entrepreneur. I've been in business for myself most of my life. I have not had a common career track. Didn't go the corporate route. I have worked for other people at times, but most of the time I've been running my own businesses and that sort of thing. Was really going after I want to create freedom for myself. I want to be able to do what I want when I want. And in building these businesses, I was able to generate a good income for my family, but it seemed like my clients owned me or my business owned me. And what good was it creating that income if I couldn't enjoy it, if I couldn't spend time with my family, literally getting up before they did and coming home after they went to bed. And, it's no life. What's the point? So again, realized it wasn't working, looking for a different way, realized I needed leverage, realized I needed some mentors and, a community of like-minded people around me, found the SFM and, here I am surrounded by great people and really enjoying the journey and just loving it. Anyway, that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Steve.
How about you? You want to tell everybody a little bit about who you are and kind of your background, where you are, where you came from?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys, for having me on the show here. It's a real pleasure to be with you both. So I guess, starting with, my name is George Tsougrianis. I am an entrepreneur. I'm actually based here in Western Canada, actually the province of Saskatchewan, to be correct. I guess, my background is in video production. I guess, growing up as a child in the late 70s, early 80s, like so many others, TV was a very important part of my life. And I really started to get that bug early on in life that, what is this thing called television? And how do I become a part of that? So that was something that was very early on in my life that I wanted to be a part of it in some way. I sort of instinctively knew that. And so, I guess I've been fortunate in that I've followed that pathway. And, I did do a little bit of the corporate stuff early in my career, as so many of us do. And I'm really thankful for that because that gave me the opportunity to really cut my teeth in video production. But as the years progressed, my family background is, a lot of my family are in in businesses. A lot of them are in restaurant businesses. So that entrepreneurship was also kind of ingrained in my head as well. And so, somewhere in my 30s, I really got that inkling that I really wanted to actually branch out on my own. I think every creative person instinctively wants to have their own projects, and I think that's the holy grail that we all aspire to as creative individuals, is to being able to tell our own stories. So that process led me to basically start our own production company, and ultimately, for about the last 15 years, my wife and I have actually relocated back to my hometown, which is it's a community called Swift Current, which is in the southwestern part of Saskatchewan. And I guess we kind of saw an opportunity here. This was back in 2004 when, YouTube was just starting up. We had the idea that essentially video production from an online perspective was not quite there yet, but it was so close. And the kind of perfect storm that lined up is in this community, there was actually a television station that had been there for 45 years, had actually closed down. So there was a gap there, and geographically, because of the location of the community, there wasn't any other local television station that was directly close to the community. So we kind of thought there was an opportunity there, and when I look back at it now, it was a very risky proposition because, again, the internet was so new from an online video perspective. But I guess my instincts told me that if we created a product, that there was something there that we could leverage and ultimately utilize other partners. And so what ended up happening is we launched a local, sort of a hybrid of a local television station back in 2005 that does and continues to this day doing the job of a local television station, but doing it from an online perspective. And then we also have traditional broadcast partners that actually broadcast the show online. So it's been a wonderful experience over the last 12, 13 years now that I couldn't have imagined in terms of just the opportunities that we've had to tell great stories and the fascinating people that we've met along the way. But I guess, probably about 5 years ago, it's a machine is how I refer to it. You're feeding the beast. And so, we have a fairly small staff. We have about 3 staff. So, I guess sort of almost by design, I'm a creative person. I always was, always will be. So I'm always kind of on the front lines, having my hands right in the actual creative process. So the challenges with that is we crank out a lot of stuff. So about 5 years ago, a good friend of mine, Doug Kawarko, was kind of at that same place in his life going, well, there's got to be more to life than this, work, eat, sleep, work, eat, sleep, I don't have any children. I am married, but I recognized that, there was a real gap in my life in terms of sort of that balance, because work had defined my life so much growing up and into my later years that I realized in my 40s, this isn't how I want to live my life. So after a lot of going back and forth with Doug, we decided to kind of started out as an experiment. We started a website called Zagtime, and the idea behind Zagtime was really just more about our own journey and experiences, trying to figure this stuff out as how do we achieve this balance. And I'll give Doug credit. Doug was way ahead of me in terms of personal development. I'd been kind of dabbling with it sort of on and off, but Doug had been doing it for about 20 years. So he had a much better grasp in terms of what he wanted in terms of his life, and understanding of his commitment to his family is a strong why in his life. So about a year and a half ago, Doug came across the Stuart Ross video, and he showed me that. And I must admit, initially I was kind of skeptical, kind of thinking, is this kind of one of those, those typical things that you see online. And Doug, to his credit, kind of said, he followed the SFM Facebook page for quite a while, for a couple of months, and really resonated with what the messaging was, and said, you know what, I think I'm going to join this. So I said, okay, well, let's try it and see. And I remember distinctly logging in for the first time and seeing all the tools and just being blown away, going, wow, I thought I knew a lot about digital marketing, but I realized how little I actually knew when I started going through some of the tools that were available. And that first wake-up call, I remember listening to JJ and just sitting back in my seat and going, wow, who is this guy? And why doesn't he have a TV show? Because he just was so magnetic coming across. And from there on, I was hooked. And certainly, developing the relationships over especially this last year with you, Steve, with you, Dan, has just really reaffirmed for me how important this community is, and how important having that masterminding is. Like I sort of always kind of knew that was important, but it wasn't until, belonging to this community that I realized, man, when you have other people that are, aligned with you and have the same basic goals as you, wow, how empowering is that? So again, it's been a wonderful experience. And the one thing I'll kind of cap it off with was going down to Las Vegas. We were going to be doing, initially Doug and I had discussed about going to the Las Vegas Momentum Day and actually doing a testimonial video, thinking, well, I'll bring the camera along. We'll talk to some members and actually kind of put together kind of a sales video. But as the event drew closer, there was something inside of me that said, yeah, this isn't really a corporate project. We do a lot of corporate projects as a video production company. And I felt, this is about our journey. And I just thought, I got to come at this from more of a straight ahead documentary. And I didn't go in with any expectations other than just, well, whatever happens, we're going to capture it. And I remember, several points within the actual event going, wow, like there was just an energy. There was that's the only way I can describe it. There was just a visceral energy that I remember just literally being hit with a couple of times when I was doing some of the shooting and stuff. I'm going, wow, there's something here bigger that I'm sort of sensing. And again, when we came back and we started going through the footage and started putting it together, it was kind of, it turned to be, it was about a 20-minute documentary, and those things typically aren't easy, but again, it just kind of seemed like things were coming together in a very easy way. There was, as athletes call it, there was a flow about it, right? And that doesn't happen very often, at least for me, when these projects happen. There's usually a little pain involved, and it was amazing how quickly things came together. But again, there was a very pivotal moment in that project where, and I talk about this a lot, where it was a weekend and I was kind of putting some of the finishing touches on the film, and it came time to do some of the credits. And on the front end, there was kind of an opening sequence, and I wanted to put initially our sort of our branding that we often do for our company. Our company is called Overtime Communications. So I started with that, and then it just doesn't fit. The wording didn't look right and stuff. So then a thought popped into my head. I go, well, what do I put? A film by George Tsougrianis. So I typed that out. I looked at it and I go, oh, who do you think? Like, I was immediately hit with all of these negative thoughts going, George, who are you? You're not a filmmaker. How dare you? You had about 2 or 3 other people that helped you on this. You can't take all the credit for this. And there was this mental gymnastics that ensued, going back and forth with this. And I remember just going, okay, shut up. And I thought about it and go, you know what, George, this is always what you've always wanted to do. You've always wanted to be a filmmaker. You've got to a certain level. You're a good storyteller, but now you want to be, and this has always been inside of me, you've always wanted to be that world-class filmmaker. And I remember thinking, yeah, the only way I'm ever going to get there is if I say I am, and just say, yeah, I am. I may be not there today, but I'm marching towards that goal. And so that was an extremely pivotal moment for me, and it's been a wonderful ride ever since then, because again, having the community, having all of the tools, having the personal development and the personal growth through it, the community has really kind of gotten me to where I am today, which is, again, in a few days here, I'm going to a media conference that's been a huge chokehold for me because, again, world-class people are going to be there pitching film ideas and television series. And this is something I've always wanted to go to, but I've always felt, I'm not quite good enough. And I realized how much of a chokehold that's actually been for me. And again, I'm going to point it all right back to SFM and the community, because without the work, I've done the work on myself, but without the support, there's no way I know I wouldn't be here where I am today. So huge thanks to the community.
George, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, man. That's really good. And I think I want to touch in a bit on the breakthroughs that you've mentioned there about your, the sort of film company, but also yourself, overcoming those challenges and starting to see yourself in that way. Because I know from experiencing that and seeing that in yourself on the live calls as part of the community, that has just been a hugely inspiring thing to witness. But just for a second, let's go back to, you mentioned before SFM, you were in the cycle of, work, eat, sleep, work, eat, sleep, work, eat, sleep, work, eat, sleep. And then Doug, business partner, came up with or discovered SFM. So when you were going through that initial process and you were looking at SFM, there's a sort of skepticism there, and you weren't sure whether it was for you. What were you looking for in that moment that helped you transition into thinking, you know what, this could be the thing that will change? What was it for you that you felt it was going to do, or that you wanted it to do to sort of change your life in that stage?
I think the principal thing was, for me, I love what I do, but I want to really take control of my life and design the life that I want, which was, for me, getting out of this perpetual volume business that we're in and being able to pick our projects. So for me, that meant being able to really accelerate our income to a point where, money isn't as much of a factor anymore. You don't have to take a whole bunch of projects because you need to basically make ends meet at the end of the month because you've got staff and expenses and all that kind of stuff. So I guess that's one of the things that Doug and I were really searching for, was to find sort of an opportunity where we could still do some of these things that we want to do, but do them in a way that really allowed us to take a lot more control of our lives and try to ultimately get to that balance that I think we're all kind of seeking for.
Yeah, kind of self-fund projects, if you will.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think that's really the ultimate goal still.
Yeah, because then you're not giving up creative control to the people who fund the project, and will tend to then influence, oh, we would like to go this direction, and as the creative type that you are, that is not the best working environment.
The other distinction I want to make too is that I realized that, and this has come a lot later on. Like, the other really important distinction is that, for me, SFM represented kind of almost a way out from my business, going, I like telling stories, but this day-to-day grind that we're in really is wearing thin for me. But what's interesting now is I realize that, it's probably been a couple of years where I've kind of taken my foot off the gas on this business, and I kind of look at that and go, George, you need to really kind of own up to that, because either you're in it or you're not in it. And so one of the things, and I remember Stuart kind of talking about this, I think at one of the Momentum Days, talking about how, the hardest place for a person to be is when you're not exactly happy of where you are, and you kind of have an idea of where you want to go. And you're kind of caught in that middle gray area, right? So what do you find yourself thinking about? Well, for me, it was always the negative stuff, thinking about, oh, well, why don't I have this? Why aren't I already over there, right? As opposed to now kind of looking at it and going, yeah, this is pretty cool what we've created here, and I still, there's a lot of days where I get to go do some really cool things that that I'm thankful for, and really kind of looking at that from a gratitude perspective. Like, I guess that's a really important word for me, right? Is being grateful for what I have, and even the things that are, quote unquote hardships, of really embracing that and saying, you know what, that's good, because there's at that intersection of pain and urgency is where that growth kind of happens, and that hardship is a great marker to tell you that you're on that right track. So yeah, there's been some really great distinctions along the way.
Definitely. And then in terms of distinctions, so you touched on it already, your own personal sort of transition of overcoming, in your own mind, the limiting beliefs and thinking that you weren't good enough to be, for example, putting your name on the video, right? Now, I'd imagine that it's probably not one distinct thing that caused you to overcome that. It's probably a collection of, working on yourself and working on yourself and working on yourself, and then reaching a point where you felt comfortable in your own mind to do that. But can you kind of try and summarize or explain to someone watching who has something they want to achieve and then they're not able to achieve it, what was sort of that transition in your mind to actually take the leap and reach that point where you decided, you know what, I'm just going to do it? Like, to sort of help someone overcome that, what would you say to that kind of person?
Well, I guess to sum it up, really, it comes down to a part of my why is really about, what are those, it kind of sounds a little bit morbid, but for me, it's, at the end of my life, what am I going to look back on? Am I going to look back at the failures, or am I going to look back at, wow, look at the challenges that I've overcome, and look at the things that I went after. And even if I didn't succeed, at least I've tried. To me, that's the realization, I guess, that I've come up with, is that it's way worse to leave stuff on the table and go, what if I just would have went? What if I would have just tried? Like I find now, like, again, I think I've had a lot of conversations with individuals within the community. I've certainly talked a lot with my partner, Doug. All of these things have really happened. But I think the biggest thing was SFM really forced me to take a hard look at myself. And like, I think a lot of these feelings for me were really buried deep, because again, over a lifetime, you kind of, and you don't realize it. It's a little thing here. It's a little thing here. And before you know it, it's buried way down. And I think, it's been sort of the last year and a half as kind of chipping away at that bedrock and saying, yeah, you know what, if I don't, like, I know now, if I don't deal with this, if I don't embrace it, if I don't go after it and at least try, I'll never be able to really live with myself. And I know, that's way worse than the little bit of fear that you're going to feel when you're put in those uncomfortable situations.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that. So kind of give us some perspective. This might be a multi-answer question, but if look at yourself, now, mindset now, and where you see yourself in 1, 3, 5 years, pick a number, whatever, but where you see in your future, and then how is that different than a year and a half or 2 years ago, and where you saw yourself 1, 3, 5 years from then? How has your future, the future you imagine for yourself, how is it different now than 2 years ago? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think you just said it. Imagine my future. Like I like so many other people, kind of stumbled through life. I kind of had a vague idea of where I wanted to go, but it's kind of like, oh, another year goes by, and I never realized, I should actually visualize where I want to go. And so, it's been a bit of a process for me to get to the point where I've developed my meta story. And it's changed over the last year in terms of, okay, what does my life look like? And as you pointed out, Steve, where am I going with this life? So I find myself really getting into a I'll call it a very structured routine in terms of, okay, what am I visualizing for my life? what am I saying to myself? What are my thoughts? And really recognizing how important those thoughts are, and recognizing when those negative thoughts do pop in. So it's really, I guess it's really coming down to developing that proper positive mindset. And I can see myself looking at it even from a year from last year, how much, whether it's meditation, whether it's really understanding my why, really developing my meta story, and really trying to actually take that in, not just it's a bunch of words, but actually, okay, what does that actually look like? So I'm a filmmaker. What does that actually look like? What kind of films do I want to work on? What do I want to say? So it's kind of like one part brings up some of these questions, but when you bring up these questions, then, ideas can kind of formulate. So for me, I envision like the next 2 to 3 years, I'll have a much clearer idea of the kind of projects that I will be doing as a company, and the things that I will be doing as a filmmaker. Because right now, I'm just kind of sort of at that beginning stage of really just trying to figure out, okay, like for me, I want to do stories that are meaningful. I want to do things that inspire people to wake up, to experience more, and to live their passion. Because gosh darn it, life is just too short. And it's a cliche, but I look around, and so many people are just kind of going through life. And I was one of them. And I just think, wow, it's like, it's just like taking off those dark sunglasses and looking at the vibrancy of the world and saying, wow, like, and you can really be anything you want. But the really important thing is belief. You have to have belief in yourself, and no one, I don't care who it is, no one's going to do that for you. And I guess that's the really scary part of all of this, is that we have to take personal responsibility for our own journey. And that's all the control that we really have in this life is for our own, our own destiny, and yet the irony is so many of us, myself included, we judge other people and what they're doing and what they're trying to achieve in their life. And really it's like, well, the only person that really matters in the context of understanding the journey is yourself. And so yeah, my hope is that again, over the next few years, I get even clearer picture of that filmmaker journey of mine.
That's some extremely inspiring words. And I was thinking, as you were saying that, George, so many lessons that you've mentioned there that we can all pull out of that. But I think essentially you've boiled down some of the key things that you need to live a life of fulfillment, a life of purpose, and ultimately get to where you want to get to. Because once you've got that clarity, you know what you want to achieve. And also you start to realize that the only time to go after that is now. Because like you say, regret is something that I personally don't want in my life. I never want to be in a position where I look back and think, why didn't I just try that? Why didn't I just go for that thing? Why didn't I just, go after my goals, my dreams, and all that sort of thing? And it's so important, like you say, to reach that point where you think, whatever happens, succeed, fail, doesn't matter. I'm just going to go for it and try it. And the thing that I feel, George, as you talk, I feel like you are every day getting closer and closer and closer and closer to living a true life of purpose, just doing what you want to do, being fulfilled and clear about what success and happiness means for you, and then ultimately just going out and living that. And it's just so inspiring to watch your journey over, the time that I've known you, to see how you've transitioned. So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, one of the things I want to say just really quickly is, these wake-up calls have been fantastic for me, because I can't believe the richness of this community. I mean, again, to me, I would say, if for no other reason, people should join because of the community, because I'm like, there's not a day goes by when I'm not on these calls or I'm listening to these calls that I'm not inspired in some way. When I listen to some of the stories that people, are overcoming, some of their fears or just the circumstances of their life, right? And that's the inspiring part, is that like we're all playing, as JJ says, we're all playing a big game with our lives, right? And that's so inspiring, right? And especially when you're starting out, that's probably the hardest part, is you feel like you're alone and you realize, wow, look at all these other people. They're kind of in different circumstances, but the similar sort of journey, and it's just so inspiring.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's having like-minded people around you that are on a similar journey. That's so important. There's so many different people out there that teach this kind of stuff. It's who you surround yourself with is how you're going to be. So surround yourself with the right kind of people. So one last quick little thing. Today, you're able to meet George 2 years ago. You can give him one sentence of advice. What is that going to be?
I would say believe in yourself. Have faith.
Excellent. Excellent.
Love it, George. That's perfect. I think that's a great sort of line to finish that on, put a bow on that. And again, anyone watching, George has said it, believe in yourself. If there's something you want to do, there's no room for doubt. We don't have time to doubt ourselves and not do the things that we need to do that are going to get us to where we want to get to. So very wise words, George. And thank you so much for sharing everything with your journey. And again, keep doing what you're doing. Love seeing the progression that you're making. Thank you for your time today, Steve. As always, thank you very much. And
thank you, George.
And looking forward to seeing you in Toronto, Steve, on Friday. If I'm correct.
Friday.
Awesome.
A couple of days ago.
Exciting times. Right. On that note, before my voice gives out, which I think is going to soon, we're going to wrap up there. So thanks very much for watching. Really appreciate it. George, Steve, thank you. And we'll see you all next week. Bye for now.
Thanks.